Hello and welcome back to the KCC channel. I'm Rob and I hope you're having a wonderful day today. Today we're jumping into some ProRevenge archives. Our first story today comes to us from Friend's Revenge. Mean girl betrays my friend and in return I ruin her life. Let's jump right in. I made a throwaway for this because I definitely know some of this person's friends are on Reddit. Backstory. Anyway, last year, I started hanging out with this really fun group of girls that I met through my master's program. I was in a really bad place, and these girls embraced me the right way. There were about 5 of us in this group, and I loved all of them. Well, I loved all except one. Let's call her Egotistical B. EB was mean. EB was catty. She was the wildest girl in the group. She always wanted to party. She always showed up late at the university, and she was just so fake. EB and I had the same focus in our master's program, so I, unfortunately, had to spend a lot of time with her. That quality time together made EB feel very comfortable around me, to the point where she thought she could say anything to me. In that time, she talked so much crap about every other girl we hung out with. I'm talking really mean stuff. She also continually belittled and talked down to me. She questioned my intelligence all the time and always tried to undermine me and make me feel less about myself. Now, I put up with EB because I loved the other girls and they just could not see how toxic she was. EB also rented a room from one of the girls in my group. Let's call her Dolly. Dolly is the sweetest girl I have ever met. I have only known her for a year, and she is already like a sister to me. She is the typical Southern belle type, all bubbly personality and strong accent, but she would literally give you everything she had if you asked for it. EB regularly treated Dolly terribly, late on rent, borrowing and ruining her clothes, never cleaning, but Dolly didn't say anything because she knew EB came from a bad home life and wanted her to feel safe in their apartment. Seriously, Dolly is an angel. The offense. In my program, all the MA students are also teaching assistants or research assistants. So one day, after submitting all of our students' midterm grades, our group decided to go out and have a celebratory drink. Dolly, however, did not accompany us because she was going over to her boyfriend's house. The rest of us headed to the Irish pub right off campus. We all had either classes ourselves or were teaching the next day, so most of us don't drink that much. My university has a really strict attendance policy, even for MA students, so we're pretty careful. Except for EB. She gets drunk. Like face-on sideways, rip-roaring drunk. This was not unusual. EB was known for getting super drunk all the time, but she'd really been struggling with her managing, her TAing, and her own classes, so she went for it extra hard. 2 hours after we got there, the rest of us had 1, maybe 2 drinks, and eaten to help us stay sober. EB, on the other hand, could barely stand. Unfortunately, I live in the same complex as EB, and since Dolly wasn't there, I had to take her drunk butt home. On the way home, EB starts talking about Dolly. This teasicle was so drunk that she had no filter. EB starts saying that Dolly is a dumb, inbred Southern bimbo, and the only reason that our faculty advisor liked Dolly so much was that she has a big chest. She also let it slip that she had been sexting Dolly's boyfriend and intended on, doing stuff with him. Apparently, they had been sending nudes for some time, and he'd even been sexting EB while Dolly was over at his house that night. After telling me all of this, she promptly fell asleep in my passenger seat. At this point, I am in shock, but I know I can't let this stand. You can F with me, but don't F with my friends. The revenge. My first reaction was to kick EB out of my car, but I thought better of it. We live in a pretty big city known for human trafficking crime, and I may hate the girl, but I don't want her dead or physically hurt. Instead, I drop her off at her apartment, tucked her into bed, and grabbed her phone. Using her thumb to unlock her phone, I first found all of the messages between EB and Dolly's boyfriend. I took screenshots and sent them to myself, deleting the screenshots and messages to myself after. Then, I turned off EB's alarm for the next day. As I mentioned, my university is very strict about the attendance of their students, and I knew for a fact that EB already had at least 2 warnings regarding missed or late classes. The next day, EB didn't show up to the lab she taught as a TA. She called in midway through the day and said she had the flu, but unfortunately for her, an anonymous file was sent to our faculty advisor showing a video of her doing Irish car bombs the night before. The file also came with a short note explaining that the last couple of times Evie had called in, she'd been hungover and lying as well. The same day I showed Dolly the messages between EB and Dolly's now ex-boyfriend. Dolly freaked out. I had never seen someone so mild-mannered lose their crap before, but Dolly snapped. She then told me that EB was 2 months late on rent and this was the last straw. Dolly went home that night and told EB she had a week to get the F out of her apartment and pay Dolly what she owed. When EB said I was a liar and making crap up to come between them, Dolly showed EB the messages. According to Dolly, the B went silent. What more could she say? Within the next 2 weeks, EB was crashing on some friend's couch and she was placed on academic suspension. Apparently, her grades sucked as much as her personality. That, combined with her lying attendance problems, caused the university to pull her funding. I still have to see her, but she now knows better than to talk to me or anyone in our group. We pretty much all cut her out of our lives. Sometimes I feel like I went too far, but then I remember how smug her drunk butt looked, telling me she was going to steal my best friend's boyfriend, and I feel much better. Well, OP, you can't completely blame this on their terrible home life because there's a lot of people out there that came from a terrible home life and they don't pull crap like this. Don't feel bad about anything you've done though. You literally just showed them what kind of person they really were. Good for you. Do me a quick favor, have a look down below the video. If that subscribe button's still red, it means you're not actually subscribed to the KCC channel. Please hit that subscribe button for more daily Reddit stories. Our next story today comes to us from Jar Jar Binks 237. Make my life at work miserable? You'll never work again with me. Let's jump right in. I used to work at a medium-sized IT services company and had recently been moved to a smaller branch office with a nice pay raise. I was basically my own team and got to do interesting work on a large project. Since they were satisfied with the work but needed it done in a larger scale, the company hired another person to help me. Meet Fred. I knew Fred from outside work through common relationships, and I didn't find him any weirder than the other nerdy people in the business. Oh boy. Fred was good at technical work, very good. When it came to human interactions though, it was something else. Fred thought of me as his only friend in the workplace and would be all day long about all other colleagues who were all equally incompetent, weird, evil, and generally deserving of his scorn. Fred had a terrible tendency of telling other people we had to work with that they were doing things wrong and that their software was crap, which was often technically right, but completely forgetting the constraints in which other people had to work, and that there might have been reasons for things that now sounded awful, which is basically always the case in IT. People resented both of us as a team for things he said, and some situations became entrenched. It was getting harder every day for me to get to work. Eventually, he made a lot of enemies and he got a meeting with the division director. It only lasted for a few minutes, during which he told the boss of 800 people that he was an evildoer. It was his last day in the company. I worked alone from that time and managed to finish most of the project, smoothing things over with other teams. A few months later, I got an offer for the job of my dreams in a huge utility company. After starting the work, guess who I discover working right here as a contractor under my direct supervision? Fred. Fred looked so happy to find a friend again. He spent most of my first day at work telling me how the company was awful, everyone was dumb, and everything was insufferable. I went home that night feeling horrible, wondering how much of what he told me was true, and how bad it would be to work there. Turns out, after a few hard starting days, it really was the job of my dreams. Acting now with Fred as a client and not a colleague, I managed to keep him in check and to improve a lot of the perceived quality of the team's work. Prior to my hiring, Fred was basically telling people to F off whenever they were asking him things he didn't want to work on. Having someone who could see through his BS to manage him got the roadmap back on track. Eventually, I learned that my colleagues had been very wary about working with me at the beginning because Fred had been bad-mouthing me from the day he learned I had been hired to manage him. This had made the first weeks difficult until they understood he had been lying about it all. About 2 years later, I was now team manager, and my boss comes into my office and asks me about a hiring issue. There's a new position in the team, and the recruiter asked him about someone with excellent technical skills, but who sounded very arrogant. Guess who wanted to work as my colleague again? If you'd followed the story, you've got it right. I did not let out to my boss the slightest bit of resentment. I explained to him how he was a very competent person, but that he might just lack a bit of the skills required for our company's teamwork. I knew exactly what I had to say for my boss to never want to hire him ever without making it about our personal history. I only told what happened to a close coworker, and he sounded very thankful to hear that he would not have to work with Fred as a colleague. A few months later, his company lost the contract, and Fred was hired by the new contractor. However, they were not as lenient with him as the previous company was, and another few months later, I was finally Fred-free. Last I heard of him, he was working at a Silicon Valley giant on a project that was in a worldwide media crapstorm over technical issues. I keep wondering whether he was telling everyone else in his team how bad at their job they were and how much he contributed to that massive failure. Have you guys noticed that in the ProRevenge subreddit, about half the stories there are IT related because they're so overworked and mistreated that there's a lot of revenge going on? It seems like everyone who's worked in IT has worked with a Fred at some time or another, and if you haven't worked with a Fred, maybe think about it for a moment, because you might be the Fred yourself. Our next story today comes to us from Letterforge. Don't let my neighbor build another story on his house. Lose $600,000 when you sell yours. Let's jump right in. I know this story because I'm good friends with my neighbor. My neighbor, let's call him John, 8 years ago decided that he wanted to build a second story on his house. But his property had a legal binding on it, preventing it from being renovated unless all surrounding neighbors agreed. This is called a covenant, I think, and it can't be contested in the local council. This one was over 100 years old. All his neighbors except one, let's call him Alex, agreed to let him renovate. Now, John is a big guy, ex-military and muscly. He has a wife and 2 children, but he is not quick to anger. About twice every year, John and I would write Alex polite letters asking him to lift the ban from renovating his house, and every year, Alex declined, complaining that it would be an eyesore, literally every other house on our road has 2 stories but his, or that it would ruin the aesthetic of the street. Seriously? Alex was also a complete jerk and a hypocrite, playing loud music past midnight. Anyway, for 8 years, John would get turned down by Alex, and then suddenly, Alex decided he was going to sell his house. The revenge was on. After he heard the news, John bought one of those professional metal signs that people put in front of their houses when selling, and put one in front of his own house. On it read something like, 5 new apartments being built, get in quick, 2 sold already, 3 entire stories. Loud noise expected for a year. The number given on the sign was disconnected. This was repeated in Mandarin and Arabic as well. The sign was put right next to Alex's house on the edge of John's property. The auction for the house was going in a month, and Alex was quick to get a lawyer against John to make him put the sign down. I think it was because the sign was encroaching on his land. John wrote about 60 letters to the lawyer, and it cost about $50 for the lawyer to read each letter and give his legal advice to Alex. The lawyer contacted John and told him that if he did not take down the sign a week before the auction, they would take him to court. A week before the auction, John took the sign down, but he wasn't done. The day of the auction arrived, and John parked his 4 cars along the front of Alex's house, so no one could see the auction here sign, and so the auction goers couldn't park there. John has an inbuilt sprinkler system in his house and was blasting building sound effect and music throughout his house. He put back up the sign he put down and put another one up which read, "House Demolition Furniture Sale." John brought most of the furniture from his garage and the house outside on his lawn. If people came to buy something, he would overprice it outrageously because he didn't really want to sell his stuff. It was just to make the apartment construction more believable and give the auction goers a taste of how loud it will be. When the auction took place, we could barely hear the auctioneer, and when Alex complained to John about the noise, John said that he had the builders on a contract and didn't want to reschedule. The house was estimated to go for $3 million, but ended up going for $2.4 instead. Alex had to halt his construction of his new house because he didn't have the funds. Alex, who according to John sounded like he was seething with anger, phoned to tell John that he owes him $600,000. The new owners of the property lifted the covenant when John told them about his plan. "You guys should be thanking me. I saved you $600,000. I guess it really depends on how long the neighbor was in that house that $600,000 would really make a difference, because if the house still went for 2.4, that's a heck of a lot of money. I'm betting that $600,000 isn't anywhere near as much as the house appreciated in that amount of time, so I think they still made out okay. Our next story today comes to us from the Bearded Noob. Don't want to do your chores, son? Well, have fun being stuck at home. Let's jump right in. I hope this is appropriate here. So this story deserves some context. It's actually ProRevenge that my father did to me. Backstory: after I had graduated from high school and still hadn't found my calling, my parents told me I could live with them rent-free as long as I did one very important thing: helped out with the chores, don't bring any girls or friends home after 9 p.m., and occasionally offer to help with the groceries for the week. The lead up: it had been about 3 months, and for the most part, I was adhering to the second and third rule I was given. That all changed when I met my first adult lady friend. We'll call her Roxy because she was a pretty bad AF chick. Now, Roxy was a super bad influence on me. She started getting me to stay out late, spend most of my paychecks on getting us booze and weed and such. I started slipping down a wormhole to which I almost wouldn't have returned from. My dad from time to time would remind me, "Hey son, you need to make sure you're helping with the chores, and mind throwing $50 towards groceries this week," kinda reminders. That all changed after 3 months of being out of school and about a month and a half total of me knowing Roxy. We had come home from a concert in another city. For anyone who's my almost old fart age, it was a concert for Papa Roach, and she told me she was too tired to go home and she wanted to crash with me at my parents' home. The time, 2:30 a.m. We pulled up to the driveway and I told her to be quiet. Of course, she wasn't, cause it was Roxy. Soon as we step inside the house and I've just locked the door, she starts screaming the chorus line from Twisted Sister's "We're Not Gonna Take It" at the top of her lungs. Like clockwork, my parents' light comes on and my dad comes out of his room like an effing cheetah. An effing cheetah, I tell you. He sees us both and looks back in his room. Turning his head around, he goes, "Take her home now." I immediately turn around and take Roxy home. She's all pissed and tells me I should stand up to my old man, yada yada yada. Soon as we get her home, I know I can't go home, so I stay at her apartment with her. The next morning, there's a text on my phone: "Come home at your earliest convenience. Love, Dad." I know I'm dead, because A, my dad never texts me, and B, if he does text me, he's more of a John Madden play-by-play kind of guy. What I mean is, he's going to give you a paragraph of words for what could have been a single sentence or two. I kiss Roxy goodbye for what I'm sure is the last time I'll see another human being and head home. When I get home, he's sitting at the table with a pen and a piece of paper in front of him. He tells me to sit down and then puts the piece of paper in front of me. The paper is an actual itemized list. He tells me that for the last month and a half, I haven't done any of my chores, and that he's calculated based on the roughly 4 to 5 hours a weekend of time I wasted for him, that amounts to his pay, which was $25 an hour. He's an RN, aka registered nurse. So he's taken 4 hours times 6 weekends times 25 per hour pay and figured that I need to pay him $600 for time wasted. Then he's also for good measure thrown in an extra $100 for the 2 times he's asked me for $50 to help out towards groceries. He gets up and walks over and says there is a dotted line for me to sign stating I will pay all of this back in 1 month's time. I'm adding it all up in my head and tell him I barely have $1,000 after taxes a month. He says I should have thought about that before I brought a girl home at 2:30 in the morning. He tells me if I don't sign this paperwork, I have 30 minutes to get my crap and get the F out. I legit almost start bawling and tell him that I want to sign the paper, but could I at least have a month extension? He puts his hand to his chin thinking, and then looks down at me and agrees. He says, you have 2 months to pay me $600. Oh, and by the way, he purposely hangs this in the air for a good 20 seconds. If you don't pay and you continue to break my 3 simple rules, there will be pain in your future. He revises the contract he wrote up on paper, and I sign it. So a month and a half goes by, and I've managed to pay him $450. I haven't seen Roxy as much over the 2 months because, for obvious reasons, her cash pit has dried up a bit. She then calls me on day 45 and tells me that she misses me. She wishes we would hang out. Why am I working so much overtime? I told her that I have to pay my dad back or get kicked out. Of course, she ends up ending the call shortly after that, and then it happens. She texts me the next day about a show in another city. I hear all the usual, oh, it's a band I really like. I've been wanting to see them forever. Plus, I miss snuggling up to you at the concert. I somehow stupidly agree to go with her. Well, while we're up there, my wallet gets stolen out of my front pocket. To this day, I think Roxy did it, even though I've never been able to prove it. We go home, I drop Roxy off, and a few days go by. My dad comes knocking on my door as it's now officially day 55. He asks me, do I want to pay him the last $150 or wait till the 2 months are officially up? I tell him I got him and that I'll go to the bank right now, seeing as I just got paid the day before. I look around my room for my wallet, nowhere to be found. I go find the jeans I wore at the concert I was at with Roxy, no wallet in there either. It's worth noting, I had and still have a terrible habit of leaving my wallet in my jeans after I take them off and forgetting that for several days. I start panicking as I cannot find my wallet anywhere. I check everywhere in the house, the backyard, my car. I even call the last place I was at work and see if they might have it. No one's seen my wallet. I go back to my dad's, who's in the backyard cutting the grass, and tell him what's going on. He gives me half grin and says, sorry for your situation, but I'm treating you like a tenant now. Go to the bank, get my money, and when you come back, pay me the $150, we'll go from there. I haul butt to the bank, and my heart about falls out of my chest as the teller tells me my account has a balance of $3.42. My heart drops to the ground. Worth noting here that it was a local bank that I've banked at since I was around 13. I was 18 at the time, so they all knew me at the bank, and with some quick verification, gave me info on my account. I head back home and tell my dad what happened. He puts his hand on my shoulder and says, that sucks. Well, you know I'm gonna have to get my $150 still, right? I tell him there's no way to have the money to him in 5 days or less. He says, okay, well, how about I drive you to work, seeing as you don't have a driver's license right now? He drives me to work, to which I'm there for roughly 8 hours. The revenge. While at work, my dad pulled out his massive collection of Craftsman tools and proceeds to drain all the fluids in my car. He gets a buddy to come over and help completely remove my motor, my transmission, and my tires. My dad and his buddy, being an ASE master mechanic, managed to do all of this in an 8-hour shift of me being at work. At the end of my 8-hour shift, my dad is in the parking lot waiting for me. He's in his work coveralls, which I find funny, and he's got grease all over his arms. He drives me home, and I notice my car is pulled into the garage and on jack stands. I look at my dad and ask, what's up with my car? He points to the garage. Oh, go ahead and see. I've got my $150 today. I jump out of the car as it goes into park and run over to my car. There's a note on the front of it from my dad's mechanic friend stating the motor, transmission, and tires have all been sold to him for $150 and that he'll happily not only give me back the items, but he'll help me install them back into my car, but that I have to work for him on my 2 days off for the next 4 weeks from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. I fall over crying, obviously, and my dad laughs a bit, tells me my first shift starts tomorrow. It is further worth noting that my dad actually owned this vehicle and it was titled, tagged, and licensed in his name. So technically, he could do whatever he wants with it. He had just chosen to allow me to use the vehicle as mine. I would spend the next 4 weeks working with my dad's mechanic friend on my days off. After 2 days of working, we'd bring a few pieces of my car back to the house and he'd teach me how to put these items back together. And slowly but surely, I learned how to be my very own mini DIY garage mechanic. This may not fit here, and my dad did ProRevenge me because shortly after I lost my car, Roxy dumped me, and of all things my dad took 6 months out of my life to teach me how to be a somewhat responsible adult. Oh, and the icing on the cake, soon as we had my car back together and running, my dad walked up to me and gave me an envelope with $450 in it, and a note that said, "Stop being a knucklehead." Okay, so dad might have taken it too far, but in all honesty, I'm sitting back here right now thinking your dad's a bit of a genius. I think he deserves a medal. That's one good way to deal with your kids and teach them a little bit of responsibility. Check out all 4 OPs linked at the description down below. I thank you for watching. I hope you have a wonderful day, and we'll see you tomorrow.